So yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of the Abu Dhabi fix, and today is the 2-year anniversary of this video that Sky Sports produced as their validation video. I have gone through this before, but I'm going to go through it again and expose even more, because as the picture emerges we can pick out more and more and more. So the video is on the Sky Sports F1 channel. It's called It Would Be Terribly Sad, and it is Martin Brundle on the 2021 title being decided in court, produced on the 13th of December 2021, the very next day after the Abu Dhabi fix took place. So let's go through it. Here we go.
Now, Martin, thanks for joining us. Everybody has been talking about this, so 24 hours or so on. What are your thoughts on what happened?
Well, it was an incredible few minutes of sport, wasn't it? With a very grave consequences if you were Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes-Benz, and an amazing experience if you were Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Very complex matter. So it was so exciting to a wonderful finale to a wonderful Grand Prix season. But then, of course, you know, there's a lot of controversy around it, and it's all a bit uncomfortable and doesn't shine a particularly good light on Formula One and its processes. But it was a hugely complex and compressed moment.
So Martin is the expert. Martin at that stage had been involved in Formula One for 38 years. 10 years as a driver, 28 years as the presenter, as this expert of the sport. That's what he's employed as. That's what he's employed to be presented to you, the viewer, as being the man with all the knowledge. So Martin is telling you it was extremely complex. It was, difficult to understand. But as an expert, he should be capable of telling you this. So I'll tell you what happened, and let's see if Martin is able to tell you what happened. I'll tell you what happened. With just over 5 laps of the event to go, a car crashed, which caused a safety incident. So the way you deal with that is you deploy the safety car, which is standard. What happens during a safety car is it can take around about 5 to 6 laps before you can go racing again. You have to get everything under control, which the cars have to slow down. They all have to bunch behind the safety car. Whilst that is going on, you clear the track up. You make sure that the track is safe. You make sure the barriers are safe. And when that process is done, what you then have to do, if there are lapped cars in place, you have to send those cars off around the track so they join up with the back of the pack, so that you have the correct race order restored. First down to the last remaining competitor in a line behind the safety car, and then you have achieved the restart conditions which are required before you can then resume racing again. The reason that is because when a safety concern interrupts a race, what it does, it nullifies the racing, and all gaps between all competitors get nullified. And if you don't unlap cars, what happens is some of the cars are able to close up gaps and get right on the tail of the car they were previously challenging. They might have been 12, 20, 40 seconds behind somebody, but they get to close right back up. And yet other cars end up being left almost a lap behind somebody that previously they weren't that far behind. And I keep giving the example of Lando Norris and Pierre Gasly. Lando Norris was only 12 seconds behind Gasly when Latifi crashed. And if you don't unlap Lando Norris is held back behind Lewis Hamilton, and Pierre Gasly is at the end of the safety car snake. So Lando Norris is now a lap behind Pierre Gasly almost. And you cannot allow a safety situation to create that different impact to each of these competitors. Hence, the regulations are written to ensure that doesn't happen. Hence, you have this procedure. And if that procedure cannot be carried out in time, before these laps just keep ticking by and you reach the final lap of the race, then that race ends behind a safety car. That's the way the sport is. It is very simple. All teams know that, all competitors know that, and that is it. That the FIA know that, their International Sporting Code dictates that these events are carried out in accordance with their code, which specifies sporting fairness. That underpins all of the regulations, and all of those regulations are to be applied with respect to sporting fairness. It's very simple. It's not hugely complex and compressed. But let's see what Martin tells us.
And several regulations were tripping over themselves, and we ended up with a bit of a hybrid solution there, which is why the lawyers are getting involved and
It's not incredibly complex. It's not no regulations trip over themselves. It's not interpretation. It's not scaring everybody with this language of, oh, the lawyers are getting involved. You won't understand this. This is complicated. The average Joe in the street can't understand this. So I'll tell you it's only lawyers can understand this. Nothing like that at all, Martin.
Interpretation of wording in the regulations, and of course, the sporting regs are 99.
It's nothing to do with interpretation of wording. It quite simply is a case of, we know what the process is, this is what that process achieves. If you attempt to suggest an interpretation which produces a corrupt outcome, that outcome resulting in a situation which is certainly nothing to do with sporting fairness, a situation where just two competitors are separated out to race off for a win, well, clearly you've got the interpretation wrong. Clearly you've interpreted those rules corruptly. So it's nothing to do with interpretation. And considering these regulations had been in place since 2012, and there'd been 10 seasons, this was the end of the 10th full season where they'd operated under these regulations, 199 Grand Prix, all competitors, all teams knew what they knew what they were. They didn't need to interpret them any differently any other time.
In pages, and you need to read every single word carefully. It's like a legal document. And the sport.
Oh, once again, we throw in this notion of, oh, legal document. You won't understand that. It's all too complex for you.
Code, which backs everything up, is that sort of thick.
Yeah, and it's that thick, and again, it's too complicated for you. You won't understand it. So this is what you are doing, Brundle. You are convincing people that it's all so complex and nobody can understand it. But I think everybody can understand what I just explained at the start. Now, who's the expert, Martin? Who's the expert? Who's the one that's paid to educate people about this sport? Who is the person that is paid handsomely to educate people about this sport? And what are you doing? You are serving your paymasters by lying to people, presenting to people that it's all so complex. Validation for the fix, validation for the fix, validation for the fix.
And it's just, it's a minefield. And in the heat of...
No, it's not. Quite simple, isn't it, Martin? I've explained how simple it is. There's a car crashed, you deploy the safety car. The cars bunch up behind that safety car. While that is taking place, the track gets cleared, gets made safe. Once it is declared safe, you perform the unlapping procedure, and that procedure consists of releasing the lapped cars and doing a further lap of the safety car with which to enable them to catch the back of the pack. Then and only then can you go racing again. The race director didn't do that. He broke the rules of the sport, and in doing so, it changed the outcome of the race. Had he have applied the rules of the sport, there would have been one winner. That would have been Lewis Hamilton, because it would have been a safety car finish. There are no other options. No other options. And so what we had is the officials of the sport breaking the rules of the sport and manufacturing a different outcome to what the known outcome would have been. What we also had was the TV company that were broadcasting what they were showing you as images and making you hear in terms of the radio messages. They were transmitting into your room, into your TV, things which were not relevant, but were conditioning you to believe it was possible for a racing finish to that event. You yourself, Martin, and David Croft were lying about the rules of the sport in those safety car laps. You were presenting things such as, how long will they wait? When you know that once them lapped cars have been released, there has to be at least a further mandatory lap of that safety car. You are pretending that they can actually restart this race with lapped cars being left there. That's not in the regulations whatsoever. But you were lying. You were serving your paymasters in presenting that these were possibilities. You were purposefully disorientating the viewer with your lies, and the reason you did that was to set up the fix. You were in on it, Martin.
At the moment when Michael Massey, the race director, had to consider the safety of marshals, was the car out of the way, he couldn't release the cars until he was the lapped cars until he was certain that the track was reasonably clear. Although
it's nothing to do with reasonably clear. He can't release them until the clerk of the course has given him the authority to do so. The clerk of the course will check the safety of the course. That's his responsibility. He is the person liable if something happens. So therefore, he'll ensure that it's safe, and then he'll hand back to the race director to perform the correct procedure in order for us to go racing again.
Of course, have to proceed with caution anyway. And you know what? Even knowing who the lap cars are is not as straightforward as you might think, because you get a safety car situation and some cars pit, and that means they are then lapped, or the leader pits and unlaps some other cars. So it takes a certain amount.
Didn't happen, did it? Let's be clear, it didn't happen. The leader didn't pit, because we know Lewis Hamilton didn't pit. And we also know that none of those cars that did pit ended up getting lapped whilst they were in the pits. So you've just presented a smoke and mirrors presentation to confuse a situation that didn't happen. Okay, and then you go on to say, even knowing who the lap cars are, well, quite simply on data view, it tells you which cars are plus one lap. And quite simply, that car behind Lewis Hamilton was Lando Norris. And prior to Perez retiring, Norris was in 8th position. So you know, if you are 8th or lower, you have been lapped. It is quite simple, Martin.
And a time to work out exactly who the lap runners are, where they are in the pack. But the fundamental point of that rule is to make sure that they don't get in the way of a great duel towards the end of a Grand Prix. And
that's not the fundamental point of the rule. This is a lie. It's an absolute lie. There is no such thing as a great duel. Every competitor is in a Grand Prix. Every competitor can challenge. It's not separating out two competitors to race off. That's what your definition of a duel is. Okay, it's nothing to do with that. It is giving every competitor the same sporting chance. It is allowing them, it's ensuring that these cars that have been lapped have not had their races unjustly impacted by a safety incident. And Lando Norris did. That is the purpose of the regulation. It is nothing to do with getting them out of the way of a duel. Absolutely nothing to do with that. But again, this is the contrived lie that you have come up with in advance and are now using as validation.
it happened, didn't it?
It certainly did. And you mentioned there about kind of the legal battles and such, like how...
These are the talking heads that we get in the studio asking the leading questions. We can take you through every interview that took place after Abu Dhabi, and you get somebody like this asking questions in this manner.
Sad would you be to see this all decided at some point in a courtroom?
Well, I would be sad 90.
It would be terribly sad, and I can't really see where it can go, if I'm honest, because what's the...
That's right, Martin. You tell everybody that you can't see a way forward in the court process for this, because that's again directing people to say there's no possible way of any court proceedings applying to this. This is part of your role. This is what you're convincing people of. There's no possible way to unravel this, when there clearly is. There clearly is, and you will see, Martin, you will see. You yourself are culpable for your role within this, and that's why you would be terribly sad as well. You should be receiving a custodial sentence for your role within this fraud. The UK Serious Fraud Office does not seem to want to investigate crime. They don't want to seem to do their fucking job, right? But you should be in prison for what you've done. But as civilians, we're going to hold you to account. You will see.
Remedy. For example, Red Bull didn't do anything wrong. There are no misdemeanors on their part. Or
Martin, straight away, Red Bull didn't do anything wrong. So they didn't breach the FIA International Sporting Code by coercing an official to break the rules of the sport. That's not doing anything wrong. No? Okay, thank you for your insight there, Martin. Thank you for your insight. Now, we'll get to the bit where he says about clever cards.
Or Carlos Sainz coming in third for Ferrari, for example, Yuki Tsunoda for AlphaTauri.
Why are you bringing Carlos Sainz in third as if oh, they didn't do anything wrong? Well, Carlos Sainz was in third position in that safety car, Snake. He finished third in the race. What are you trying to say? Carlos Sainz, well, it's a safety car finish, would have come third anyway. Yuki Tsunoda, he had the opportunity to gain places when he shouldn't have. It was a safety car finish. Bottas would have finished fourth. And actually what happened, Bottas got overtaken by both AlphaTauris. Them AlphaTauris had to go past Mick Schumacher, the lapped car that was left in place. And not only did they go by him, they both got past Valtteri Bottas, who was on old hard compound tyres, which weren't as old as Lewis Hamilton's tyres. And both AlphaTauris, which aren't as quick as Red Bulls, got past that Mercedes. That's the advantage of the soft tyres. That's the level. But you're saying, oh, they didn't do anything wrong. You can't unravel that. Well, you can, because they should never have had that opportunity to overtake. The finishing order was that order behind the safety car.
How are you going to unravel all of that? You can't just suddenly count back a lap.
Well, yes, you can. There was a point in time where the rules were broken. That was on lap 57, when the race director chose to only pick out 5 cars to send them off to unlap rather than all 8. Then he brought the safety car in without making that safety car perform an additional lap. So he's broken the rules at least twice there. And then those release cars have, rather than use that lap to unlap and proceed around the track without overtaking at a sensible pace, effectively they're set off to race that lap. There are multiple rule breaks, so the rules of the sport were broken by the governing body of the sport on lap 57, which means the only valid result is at the end of lap 56. So the running order at the end of lap 56 is valid up until that point. For a race to go 56 out of 58 laps validly, you can declare a result at that point in time. You can declare a result at the end of lap 56. Quite simple. And if there is nothing in the regulations, which there actually is, but if there wasn't, as a governing body, if something unforeseen happens, what you do, what your role is to look at the situation, acknowledge what has gone wrong, and set a precedent. Explain to people, this is what has gone wrong, and this is what we need to do about it. That's what you do. It's very, very clear.
Because I don't think there's any precedent or regulation to suggest that.
Get a head start on your...
So this will be a nice advert. I'm just going to pause it while this goes through. We're back.
What should have happened is we should have had a red flag. So
again, what we're doing, we're causing diversion, we're causing smoke screen, we are bringing into the mix lots of variables, lots of options that then get argued about in the comment section of social media. Everything that Brundle says gets repeated by the people arguing in social media. Oh, we should have done this, we should have done that, we should have done this, we should have done that. No. The red flag is used for certain scenarios. This wasn't one of those scenarios. This scenario, if it happens in any Grand Prix at any time, is dealt with a safety car. So just because it was the last Grand Prix of the season in the last couple of laps doesn't change that. Cars could go by that scene. There was a passageway by. It wasn't as though the track was completely blocked. Nicholas Latifi didn't require medical attention and have the medical car on the track. The incident could be cleared up within an acceptable timescale, which was the normal timescale for clearing this sort of incident up. The barriers didn't require excessive time with which to repair them. It was a safety car situation. So declaring that this should have been a red flag is not true at all. That's not how that doesn't fulfill the criteria for red flag.
So that then the mess could get cleared away of the accident. Drivers could then choose their tyres, and there would have been a 3-lap shootout towards the end.
No, a Grand Prix is a Grand Prix. It's more of an endurance event. It is contested over, I think it's 306 kilometres, whatever it might be, 190 miles, whatever the distance is. That's the Grand Prix distance. It is seeing who can complete those amount of laps in the quickest time. It's not a case of let's all race for 180 miles, and then all that's happened for them 180 miles, we'll forget all that, and what we'll do instead is see who wins over 10. That's not what a Grand Prix is. You are bastardizing the rules of a sport to set that up, to re-inject drama to that event. Okay, let's all run a marathon, but with 100 meters to go, we'll stop all of the athletes, we'll wait till everybody catches up, and then we'll have a 100-meter sprint to see who wins that marathon, shall we? That's what you're suggesting, Martin Brundle. Now, the rules and regulations of the sport are written and do enable that sort of thing due to a safety incident. But you don't bastardize them to manufacture that. And that situation should have resulted in a safety car finish, 100%.
Strictly speaking, the regulations suggest that the safety car should have completed the next lap. And in fact, the regulations do allow.
Strictly speaking, the regulations suggest. The regulations suggest, do they, Martin? They suggest. The regulations dictate. Strictly speaking, the regulations suggest the safety car should have completed the next lap. What are you doing? You're validating. You're a paid validator. You are presented as the expert and you are lying to the world. You are lying to kids. You are damaging the minds of fucked up people because you're feeding them with disinformation. You damaging bastard.
For if it's going to be a safety car finish, in other words, an accident just cannot be cleared away in time. The safety car pulls in the pits. There can be no overtaking. So the glorious shot for the world to see on the TV and the photographers is not of a safety car with its lights blaring away with the winner behind it, but a racing car and a racing driver. So all sorts of provisions in there. As I say, we ended up.
All sorts of provisions in there. There's not all sorts of provisions in there at all. That's just what it is. There's not all sorts of provisions. Once again, what you are doing, you are disorientating people, making people believe this notion of it could have been this, it could have been that, maybe it should have been this, maybe it could have been that. There's provision for this. All lies. All lies. No statement of fact that had the rules have been followed, which needs to happen in sport, had the rules have been followed, Lewis Hamilton would have been an 8-time world champion.
With a bit of a hybrid of all that, and you can look.
You want to call it hybrid? I'll call it bastardizing the rules to facilitate an outcome, to manufacture an outcome.
At it and argue that it played so heavily into Red Bull's hands at that point that it was unfair. But then Red Bull.
You could argue that, could you, Martin? You could argue that. Let's all argue in the comments section. Let me know what you think in the comments section. I'll give you all the ammunition, strap-on fans. I will tell you it could have been this, it could have been that. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. let's cause the conflict. Let's present all of the bullshit and not have clarity, the clear rights and wrongs of the situation. Instead, let's confuse the issue. Oh, there's confusion because it's a document that's this thick and it's 100 pages long, and unless you're a lawyer, you won't understand. But let me know what you think in the comments section.
Played some clever cards with this.
Red Bull played some clever cards with their strategy. I'll tell you what happened, and I'll tell you what clever cards Red Bull played. Because it wasn't with their strategy. Their strategy was that they'd pitted Max Verstappen twice, and they were 12 seconds behind with just over 5 laps to go, and were not lapping any faster. There were 3 cars in between Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton had lapped Lando Norris in 8th position. Max Verstappen hadn't done that. Max Verstappen hadn't made it past Ocon, Alonso and Norris. They then pitted Max and let another 2 runners through, which he had lapped, meaning there were 5 cars in between them. So with 5 laps to go, 12 seconds behind, lapping at a similar pace, he's not closing 12 seconds. It's not happening. Nothing clever about clever cards with strategy. They were opportunist, in as much that when that incident happened, they pitted him. But had the rules been followed, they wouldn't have got a chance to use those soft tyres, because the race ends behind the safety car, and it doesn't matter what compound of tyre you're on when you're lapping behind the safety car, because you can't overtake. So you're all travelling at the same speed, so the tyre compound is irrelevant. The clever cards are this. The entire sport had an agreement beforehand. Probably somebody like Greg Maffei, the CEO of Liberty Media, informed all of these teams that due to the global spectacle, which was this season-ending event, and having the eyes of the world on it, the impact of that having on the whole sport in terms of raising its profile, attracting a bigger audience that they wanted to keep, because that increases the value of the sport, which increases the value of all of the teams. They get more money back from advertising revenue for the bigger audience they now have. They didn't want to turn people off. So they suggested if it ended behind a safety car, people would be confused. They wouldn't understand. They would think, oh, this isn't a great sport, is it? It's all kind of fizzled out. We won't bother watching that next year. So they created this agreement between teams saying, you know, ideally it'd be good if it's a proper racing finish, wouldn't it? And all the teams goes, yeah, we can see the advantage of that. Once they'd got that agreement, Red Bull went off and played their clever cards. Red Bull got together with F1 TV, with Liberty Media, because Greg Maffei used to work with Oracle, Red Bull's main sponsor. Oh, funny how these links work. With Sky Sports F1, with Brundle and Crofty, that were there lying about it, with the FIA, the people that break the rules. And they hatched this plan. Red Bull, indeed, did play some clever cards. Once they got the agreement, if Max wasn't in front, something was going to happen. Something did happen. And then the rules were broken. And when some rules were broken, well, we can argue whether or not we believe Latifi's crash was on purpose, and it actually doesn't matter. When it comes to the court case, it does not matter, because we don't need to prove that. Or we can demonstrate clearly evidence that the rules were broken. Prior to the rules being broken, Sky Sports lied about the rules. F1 TV contrived a narrative. The FIA broke the rules. The stewards broke the rules. In the aftermath, every single media lied. And in the 2 years since, no single media has told the truth. That's enough evidence to prove exactly what has gone on here. That's enough evidence to prove exactly what has gone on here.
A strategy, perhaps on the first virtual safety car, Mercedes-Benz were a little bit too cautious, leaving
Irrelevant.
them 44 laps to go on a set of tyres. So,
Irrelevant. 12 seconds ahead, 5 laps to go. Not catching, was he? Not catching.
There was some clever
And safety car finish. Don't need to be on fresh tyres if you're just travelling behind the safety car.
strategy going on, but then Red Bull had nothing to lose. Hamilton had the
How many times have we heard that? Red Bull had nothing to lose. Right. And they would have lost nothing. And they didn't deserve to gain anything because you don't restart that race.
speed and had the lead, and so Red Bull had plenty of space behind them and grabbed a couple of safety car stops. So that's the way the cookie crumbled.
And that's irrelevant too.
Martin, there was loads of, let's call them new Formula One fans watching yesterday.
Who don't understand it, that you have taken advantage of, abused, through lying to them.
Can you see the positive that, right, they've had all that drama and we're still talking about it now, so maybe that keeps them interested. But the rules have been so complicated, a lot of people don't really understand still what actually happened yesterday. There is talk of court and such like, and those new fans might just think, actually, Formula One is so complicated, I've lost interest already.
I think we had over 9 million people watching it on TV yesterday.
Right, so again, that talking head presents it in a certain way. Oh, it's all so complicated. It's all so complicated. It's all so complicated. Once again, reinforcing to everybody, this is so difficult for you all to understand. And how did I explain the situation? This is the expert, and he can't explain it that way. If you had a university professor on a podcast asked to explain something, and let's face it, a university professor is likely to have a similar level of experience to what Brundle's got in this sport. Do you think they'd be able to explain something to you in a clear manner? Brundle can't do that. I'm going to complete this video, complete this analysis of this one in another video, because I don't want this being an hour long. So that'll do for this. I'm going to do a second part to this, just so that people get to see as much of it as possible. Thank you.